Good morning, everyone. Yes, good morning. Wow. So it looks like it has been a pretty long evening for some of you, so I'll try to do a bit of an entertainment this morning. So my name is Sam Khalil. I'm currently the vice president for a group that we have created at Novo Nordisk called Data Insights. So it's really all about how are we leveraging our clinical data. And it's in the clinical and the development space. So I know a lot of you right now are more in the commercial space, a few of you from the medical. What I'll show you today is really focusing on this medical, clinical development, medical science liaison. To tell you a bit of my background, I've been now over 18 years in pharma industry. My first role was an MSL, actually, in the industry. So really directly talking with our key opinion leader, our HCPs, and all the way to leading the global medical affairs teams at some point within Novartis in Switzerland. Past 2 years now have been at Novo Nordisk, where we embarked on a journey to combine all our clinical trials data that we have accomplished and finished over the last 30, 40 years to enable all our affiliates, to enable our teams in drug development, to enable our teams in research, and our teams in market access to leverage this data for new insight generation. So I'll tell you a little bit more of what we have been doing, but also how we're using some of the latest Agentic AI on this technology. And is it a hype, like I've seen a lot of people saying, or is it actually going to help us to deliver something? So when we say democratizing insights generation, what we really mean is that patients are waiting. We just need to try to innovate faster. We need to find new drugs faster. We need to convince physicians about the potential of those drugs faster. And we need to also discover new indications for our ongoing trials. We need to get our drugs reimbursed faster as well. How can we leverage our insights to get reimbursements from a market access perspective? The biggest opportunity or challenge that happened when we embarked on this journey is that we started 7 to 8 months after ChatGPT was launched. So you can imagine that we were coming in to launch a big, platform, bring all our data together from clinical, and everyone was like, please sparkle some Gen AI onto this. And this basically was the venue that you will hear from my whole presentation about how we have actually built this whole platform with the mindset of, can we leverage this data for AI? And I've seen the panel discussing many, many times, if your data is not in shape, is not in an order that can actually be leveraged, forget anything about AI. You will just be garbage in, garbage out from that perspective. So what the platform we have is called FounData. The reason for FounData is basically that it is a foundational platform for getting all our patients' data in order within the organization. And that was really essential, that if we want to do any type of AI on our clinical data, running it in silos like every one of us in pharma do, we run one clinical trial, we complete it, we database lock it, and we rarely touch it again. We're talking in here about looking at all the data that we have collected in a pooled fashion, irrespective of when it was collected. So I'll split my presentation in two parts, telling you a little bit more about the building blocks of this platform and how you could be potentially using it within commercial, within market access, like I'm saying, in a different ways, but the principles are exactly the same from a building block perspective. So we didn't start with, let's put AI, so what do we do with AI? We started more with, what are the pain points in the organization? What are the needs within the organization at Novo Nordisk right now that we needed to solve, and what can we do for this? You will hear those 4 terms, and you've seen them many, many times probably. Everyone in our organization was telling us, we can't find the data. I just can't find my data. I don't know which clinical trials we ran when. I really need an ability to search across all of this. And this can apply, again, to any type of data. Finding is extremely important. But the second most important one was, don't tell me that we have data, tell me also how I can access it. So we are in a highly regulated environment. We're in what we call secondary use of the data. This is not what the patients consented for initially when they entered the clinical trial. So what is the governance around this, and how can we get it applied? The third part is, help me connect with others in the organization. Let me break the silos. I am a medical doctor. I don't know how to actually code in Python or SQL, and I don't know what's going to be the implication from a commercial strategy. I need one place where I'm working on this data that we all can come together and we're not exchanging via emails and Teams chat. We all collaborate basically to solve the problem around the insight generation. And the last part is help me supercharge what I'm doing. I mean, we can't keep on doing at the same pace and at the same speed we've always been doing. We need to add basically an ability and democratize the access, and that's going to be the second part of the presentation of how we're actually helping them democratize access. So let's dive into them a little bit further. When we say foundational data to enable AI, basically what we had to do is all the dirty work of bringing all of this data in a harmonized pool fashion. All males and females are called the same way, the same letters in our clinical data. All our adverse events are called the same way so that we don't have to have always cleanup to do on our data. This allowed us to store our data and store our pipelines basically so that they're auditable as well. So if anyone asks us, how have you done this transformation in pharma of the data, we can go back in from that perspective. When all of this data is put together really well, what it allows us is that each of those dots is one of our patients in our clinical trials. Each of those dots basically represents what this patient had, like if you were pulling in a hospital a medical record for that patient. We basically have access to the entirety of all our patients' data so that we can start now traversing it and putting some insights generation into it. On top of it, what we have built is that we don't, like I said, want everyone to just be an explorer as a data scientist. We want everyone in the field, in our affiliates, to also be able to query the data. So we've allowed within our governance aspect that they can access this front end where they can, with a secure way, basically start searching the data after having been granted access and permission. So what they can do, and as you can see in the screen in here, they can start searching for the information by filtering. An example is you're sitting in an advisory board with your KOLs right now, and they're telling you it's great that your trial globally had this efficacy, but how many patients did we actually have from Germany? Do you have data on those patients that are from Germany right now that I can understand better? We couldn't do this before. This is now how we enable it. And we're enabling it also with Agentic AI, so you don't have to search for this. You can actually type it. I'm looking for all patients in Germany that have this CRP value or this lab assessment. How many do we have? This is what we call democratizing the access to the data, so that our field force doesn't have to come and request every time to global, can I do an analysis, when it's as simple as, I want to know the number of patients in Germany. I'm not trying to get much more information. I shouldn't wait 1 month to get that information. Obviously, we need to protect the patient's privacy. All of this is aggregated data. So at the end, if your search is starting to become too narrow, and you could start to potentially identify the patients, this is blocked at the number of less than 10 patients. So this is how you enable with a governance perspective. On top of it, what we have integrated in the whole platform is how do you request access to the data? Obviously, not everyone in the organization can access clinical patients' data, but we had to tailor it that it's as seamless as possible so that they can be requesting it. But the most important part at the bottom in here is that we have done all of this in an automated way so that the AI agents that I'll present to you very soon inherit your own credentials. So if I am sitting in front of the Novo Nordisk now co-scientist, we call it, for FounData, the agents have my same rights that basically I have based on this governance. And that is a very, very important way when you're getting sensitive data. How do you infer the governance to the agents that you're building that are going to be querying the data? So with all of this, when we're getting them the data, they can find the data, they can request access seamlessly to it, they can start to collaborate, and if they have their preferred data scientists with them, they can start deriving, complex generation of analysis, be able to respond to any field queries that are coming in to them from any of the affiliates. And so we have basically, in about 1.5 years, built this whole end-to-end from cleaning up all the data, enabling a seamless governance, adding to it basically an ability to analyze and collaborate on the data to solve problems. But this still requires a lot of different people in the organization. It still requires you to have a data scientist. It still requires you to have a data specialist that can understand how to analyze the data. And so we went on to the second part of the journey. Imagine if only all of this, basically, we could reduce further the barrier to data insight generation. Can we accelerate not only simple and very easy insight generation, like I was telling you about males and females, but can I actually, in natural language term, ask, show me a time to event of the number of heart attacks that are happening in our patients in placebo versus our treatment arm? That is not something AI, Gen AI can do on its own. And how can we still accelerate it? Because these are the questions we're being asked as a pain point. So let me spend the next 10 minutes on what have we done actually to try to solve this with our current limitation and overcoming the hype a little bit of just put Gen AI on everything. So I'll introduce to you the concept, and I don't know how much it was talked about yesterday, of Agentic AI. If you don't know about Agentic AI, maybe raise your hand if anyone heard about Agentic AI. Cool. So we have a few in here. This is really where I see the future, basically, of how we will leverage large language models for the benefit of our industry. It's about giving them a level of autonomy. It's about enabling, basically, our agents now to have an autonomy. And why we say this? Our current approaches right now focus on really, if you think about it, what the large language model is, it's a huge brain that has the information of everything we've ever collected. And it regurgitates those tokens, and it tells you, and it can understand in the neural network about what you're talking about, but it's about a set amount of information. We've tried to overcome this burden by giving it what we call retrieval augmented generation. We're adding it some of our proprietary information. But if you look at these two images, either a brain or even if we're adding information that we have to augment this with RAG, this goes against the whole principle of science. If I knew the answer to my research question, well, someone published it already, so I don't need to do the research question. So the whole principle of LLMs cannot be just used as is without adapting those large language models. And what they're missing is a lot of the planning, a lot of the autonomy to execute on their plan, to redo their plan as they need to be, and to also learn from what you have been doing. And it all comes from a system, like the principles, most of you probably knows this book about how our brain works. Our brain works in two ways, System 1 and System 2, an ability to analyze data. So when your kids are learning the table of multiplication, 2 times 2 equals 4, they're just learning it by heart. They know that after 2 times 2, 4 needs to come. It's exactly by design how large language models are. It's by design they are built to give you as quickly as possible the information. And you've seen the race in 2024 of getting faster and faster model to response, from Anthropic to everyone else. What we need in science and in healthcare and in a lot of our industry is actually to slow them down. We do have to slow them down and tell them, you need to plan first. You need to make sure about what are you going to achieve and set up your plan before going on executing it. And this actually became a marketing way for OpenAI to promote their last ChatGPT 0.01. You're now happy that it takes time. And they're promoting it as it's thinking. It's taking 30 seconds to answer your question. This is the exact same thing in here about slowing it down so that it can devise a plan and execute on it. So what we have right now is basically in our chats, in our agents in FounData, this is exactly the same way as you see on the screen. It will devise a plan. I need to look at this data. I need to analyze it. I need to create a graph. I need to review the graph afterwards. And that increases the fidelity of any of your models by almost 50 to 80% sometimes, depending on the analysis, of just asking it to first do step-by-step the plan. But doing step-by-step planning is also not enough. You need those agents to be able to actually execute what they have been looking at. So if you're having now your CRM data, and you're putting those agents on top of the CRM data, you want them to tell you what analysis needs to be done, but you want them to actually do the analysis. Look at the result of this analysis. tell what the next plan should be, and revise the plan based on the analysis that it was done. Only then will you have a sequence of events that really is going to be aligned with science, where you discover something, you adjust your plan, you rediscover it, and you allow them to just talk together. So if you followed me until then on how we're using Agentic AI, is that those agents basically have tools. They can either access our clinical data, our SharePoint, our Office 365, and they have a very specific and narrow task. We basically build one agent per very, very specific task. You can only do code. You can only do a bar chart. You can only do basically a pie chart. And this narrowing it down first reduces the cost because you're really very, very specific on what you are doing. But it also helps you get it production ready. In development in IT, when we say production ready, is you need to be able to test those agents that they're not hallucinating, that they're always giving you the same answer. And by giving them our governance as well on top of it, you're ensuring that you will have a very solid governance. But what happens if you're bringing down those agents to be so narrow and so focused? They can't do everything. So what you have to start creating is what we call a work group of agents. And that is where the magic starts happening. If any of you in September 2022, when OpenAI released ChatGPT, looked at this and were like, wow, it can write me a poem, it's amazing. Imagine when you're now starting to look at agents conversing together and solving a problem and getting basically to change their ideas after one of the other agents said something and replanning. That's when you start discovering that the power of it would have how it exchanges, so that the governance manager, basically agents, will be telling it, no, you can't do this, you have to do it another way, and the flow of event continues. Not only when you're getting that group of agents to work together is it going to be very powerful, and I can give you a few examples in every different field of our industry. If you were to think about this now as being the medical team that is writing something, and you give the content of that work group to another biostats team that is reviewing it. And so you start having this complex where you have a very intricate communication flows that goes between agents. This is what's going to remove the hype around, I'm going to just tell ChatGPT to answer anything. This becomes a lot more complex, a lot more programmatic, but gives us really a leap forward in terms of what we can do. Because with these kinds of things now, what we can run basically on our clinical data is we can ask questions about, go in our data, pull me out all our patients that we have had in our obesity trial, and do me a Nightingale chart around those trials. It's going to go, decide on the actions, find the data, know where that data is stored, analyze the data, build on the fly the graph and the chart. Basically, none of this has been coded. This has all been done on the fly by the agents, even the JavaScript that's in here that is running. And that, in our opinion, is how you're going to be democratizing the access to the data. You can audit every single step that has gone through. All the communications between those agents basically can now be auditable, and you will be able to give this information to your favorite biostatistician that will then be able to rerun the analysis if you like what you saw, so that you can actually publish and use it. And so this is really where we see the future, not only with LLMs that are just going to give us a simple, quick answer, but really with waiting. The future is basically about don't rush the analysis and the insight generation. Instead of waiting 2-3 months, waiting 1 minute for a very complex analysis to be done is actually really, really worth it from that perspective. But most importantly, that you can actually do this on a scalable way. We are actually now using this whole platform from all the way that I showed you FounData to those agentic AI and lifting and shifting it to our finance team. We're shifting it to our market access teams as well. And any group that basically needs this data plus AI can just leverage the modules that we're putting into it. So I hope it gave you a good overview of what we are basically trying to achieve in here, where sorting all our clinical data from Novo Nordisk and enabling everyone in the organization and the affiliates to search within this data and derive new insights. So with that, thank you very much.